I never had anticipated becoming this intimate with a material and understanding its wonders and its frustrations. Glass is a material that I'm really honed into. Holds great wonder for me because it can morph into so many viewpoints. It can be transparent, it can be opaque, and it can be everything in between. I have spent the last 40 years understanding the material and the alchemy of glass. I embrace all the physicality of it, transparency, its brittleness. I love what I do 40 years into it. I'm the youngest of 6 kids, grew up North Shore of Boston. My father owned a shoe company post-World War II, and my mother was an art-loving housewife. By the time I was old enough to kind of be up late, I got to accompany my mother to Symphony, to the Museum of Fine Arts. She certainly introduced me to the idea of what is art? What do we even look at? My father, his life centered around this company that he was building. On Saturdays, we'd go to the machine shop that was building a new gizmo for the factory. I worked some summers there, so I grew up kind of watching my father build this company, this business. I am the product of a bunch of schools, and I studied dance, theater, lighting design, and was working at a very well-known regional theater as an electrician called Long Wharf Theater in New Haven. And I had my days free. Theater happens at night. And I thought, oh, wow, there's this glassblowing class at Southern Connecticut State College. I should see what that's about, just because I'm a curious guy. So that was the beginning. I took this glass class. I had no intention of leaving the theater business. It had been a lifelong dream to be a touring theater lighting designer, and I was on my way to doing that. And then went out on a year-long theater tour and ended up in the hospital at the age of like 23, suffering from exhaustion because of the rigors of a theater tour. And while lying on the gurney in the ER somewhere in Virginia, I said, I think I'm going to try something else for a while. And that began a 18-month journey around the United States. And I had a book called the Hot Glass Information Exchange that listed 10 artists who had gotten together the summer before and talked about how to make stuff. No internet, no cell phones. I had a pocket full of dimes, and calling the glassblower, whose name I found in a book, and said, hey, I'm a glassblower, can I come visit you? And more often than not, they would say, sure, come on over. Why don't you stay for a couple weeks? And why don't you work in my studio for a couple weeks? So that was the beginning of the pursuit. I got back to New England and worked for a glassblower for 1 year and decided it was time to go back and finish college. And that's how I ended up at the Rhode Island School of Design. At that point, RISD was the academic center of the contemporary glass movement. Dale Chihuly had started the program, and it was just a hotbed of glass education at that time. At the time that I got out of school, I was smack in the middle of the 3rd decade of the contemporary glass movement. The most famous artists are now using glass. Everybody in the world is using glass as both a design material, a craft material, a fine art sculpture material. It's just like bronze. It's part of the vocabulary. I met with Tom Moran, the chief curator here, and he brought me through this great building that's called the Museum Building. He said, I don't want you to rein yourself in. It's very important to me that you pie in the sky this in your conception. And so given the architecture of this building, and given that mission, I was off and running. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I could just tell that this was ripe for the next iteration of what we had done at Brown University 2 years ago. I set about looking at the architectural plans. I built a 3D model within a computer program and began to walk through it. So I didn't have to be in New Jersey every day, but I came down a few times and just sat here quietly and looked at the way the light traveled from east to west and began to formulate what has become Radiant Landscape. What I wanted to do in the north end was using the amber color because I love how it comes across as sunlight. I wanted to put something opposite the amber curve, which I called the contra curve. I knew that we would have so much happening on the contra curve as a result of the amber drape. So the amber drape transmits light onto the contra curve at some hours of the day. The contra curve reflects light, but also allows light to continue traveling through it. And the silver boulder that's outside, the plane that's facing the building, turns amber. Blue horizon in the south end gives you a feeling of being underwater, but you're bathed in blue light. You'll see in Blue Horizon that there's a couple places where we left the glass separate from each other, where light comes down below. I let that be because of that idea of underwater, of that little bit of glistening sunlight that might travel down. Upstairs in the mezzanine, we have 3 volumes. That became important to me as part of this show because it was the last large-scale castings I made in the studio. This building is a place to broadcast light, and examine how people pass through this. One of the things I'm after with the work is using light generated by the work, by the shadows, by the ever-changing light, to trigger some sort of memory in each viewer. The scale is not meant to intimidate you so much as make you look up and say, wow, I've got a lot of glass hanging over my head. And you can always tell somebody that hasn't seen it before because they come in and they go like this, and then like this, and then their head goes up. The way Radiant Landscape physically came to be is I have a small crew in the studio that works a few days a week. My 2 main crew members are Emmett Barnacle and Ruby Dorchester. The glass is not made in my studio. The glass is made by Bullseye Glass of Portland, Oregon. So the glass gets shipped from Bullseye right to a company in southern Rhode Island, High-Tech Manufacturing. It's a big aerospace type of machine shop. And they used a water jet cutter to drill all the holes. This particular piece between the 2 ends of the building is 16,400 holes. Then it comes back to the studio and we cut it down. Ruby and Emmett and I cut all the glass. As you look at the work, you'll see that not every piece is square. No overlap between pieces of glass is the same. You can even see our miscart marks when we cut the line straight, but it doesn't break on the line. All of those are intentional. So then we have to figure out, once the glass is cut, how is the glass transported? Emmett set about making 160 wooden boxes that hold 25 pieces each. So the 1,100 sheets of glass got cut into 4,400 panels, cleaned, packaged, put on pallets, and to hang the glass up onto the cable frame, we needed 16,400 rivets. And they're custom-made rivets made through a process of burning the end of copper wire. But I made all the drawings that you see in the show. I made about 50 drawings with the rivets. You could draw a line across the paper, and that would take you 30 seconds. But in my world of constructing things, that same line took over 6 hours and 1,400 marks of the rivets burning the paper. The engineering is as much fun as the conceptual vision. It's how I'm wired. I love the act of making and of figuring everything out. We spent 4 or 5 days rigging everything you see here. Some of the challenges we faced were this building is 100 years old. We couldn't bolt into the wood. We began thinking about using the steel in a different way. Once the cable frame was up, we had 6 people every single day, 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, tying glass up onto the frame. Pieces won't move until we decide to take it down. What took us 3 weeks to put up shouldn't take us more than 2 days to take down. Part of the interest of making is it's a joyful process to get a team together. There's nothing I like better than the joy of curiosity and having other people working on a crew enjoying that same kind of quest for making this object that I was so curious to make. The transformation of the work over the last 30 years has been quite a remarkable journey for me. All of this stuff totally grabs me. Making big things that talk about poetics of light. I was given this opportunity to make this piece. From day one, it was always, how can we accommodate this idea? Everything I wanted to do visually was easy to get out of my head and onto this easel that is the park.